We want to welcome each of you to episode 2 of the Abundant Life podcast. For those of you that may not know, my name is Brian Egerton, and I'm joined by John Ferguson, and we're both ministers at the North Lexington Church of Christ in Lexington, Kentucky. Both of us have spent some time studying in the field of counseling, and we want to use some of that knowledge and some of that training to in this podcast to help us work through different physical and mental and emotional type issues that are prevalent in our world as human beings and especially as Christians. And we want to talk about how some of those issues may affect us in a psychological manner, in a physiological manner, and most of all, we want to look at them from a spiritual perspective and understand how we can look to God and His Word for guidance to help us overcome and work through those different challenges we may be facing in our lives. Mm-hmm. This week, we're going to be talking about the topic of self-esteem. It's a concept that fluctuates, I think, a lot in our lives, depending on the circumstances we're dealing with or the events that are taking place in our life. Sometimes we have high self-esteem, and other times in life things happen and our self-esteem begins to plummet. But it's something that we deal with and we work with all throughout our lives. So, John, as we think about this concept of self-esteem, why don't you describe a little bit for us about what it is and help us be on a level playing field as we move forward in this discussion?
Self-esteem is, as the word suggests, it's about an individual's subjective understanding of his or her value and worth, and how they see themselves, and not only that, but that is kind of somewhat determined by a lot of their feelings and emotions and things of that nature. But that's basically what it is, how a person sees themselves, their level of confidence or the lack thereof, and how they may be able to address it in some way at some point in time. But it is their subjective evaluation of themselves, how they feel about themselves.
Yeah, so it's maybe this idea that all of us are going to experience feelings of self-worth in different ways. Certain things may add more value to us than other things, and so self-esteem is a subjective thing that we have to understand what it is that makes us individually feel valuable. And I think there are a number of different things, different factors that weigh in to our self-esteem.
Yes.
Maybe it's the idea of self-confidence or feeling a feeling of security, right? We become confident in who we are or what we're capable of doing, and that confidence makes us feel more valuable. Maybe it stems from our sense of identity. We learn and we understand who we are,
right,
and how other people see us, and by gaining a sense of identity, we begin to add value to ourselves. Maybe it's a sense of belonging. Right? Maybe the more accepted we feel, the more a part of something we feel, the more valuable we feel. It seems like when it comes to self-esteem, it goes back to this idea of self-worth.
Yeah.
Right? How much value do I see in myself, and how much value do other people see in us? The truth is, though, we live in a world that makes it difficult sometimes to have a high sense of value of ourselves. Okay. We live in a world that has many challenges that may bring down our self-esteem. So why is it that maybe so many people struggle with having a high self-esteem?
Well, before we jettison to that, I like to bring up the ideal about the self-concept leading to the self-esteem. The ideal of how I see myself, what I think about myself, that self-concept leads to how I feel about myself, positively or negatively, which is what we would then call self-esteem. And how is it and why we don't always get to that point? I think that's what you said. Number one, we don't always understand what self-esteem really is. And as I said, generally self-esteem is a process we go through. It's not just some one point in time. We don't understand what self-esteem is. And then number two, we haven't always kind of gotten together and thought about all the good things that we have done, and then sat around and thought about, for as our life sum, is how we see ourselves, how we value ourselves, and do we think that the things that we have done have been positive and that they've contributed something good. Then if I don't see all of those things coming into view and I don't have them laid out before me, then it's difficult for me to be able to come to a healthy sense of self and valuing who I am and what I bring to societal, social table. So I have a problem with that. Anyone would. So I think that's the problem right now. We don't understand it. We haven't had some experiences that would enhance our sense of self-concept. And then we perhaps do not have that great strong support, that environment that is conducive to healthy, thoughts and healthy concept. That's the problem.
Yeah, environment is a huge factor.
Mm-hmm.
And to build off what you had mentioned there, sometimes maybe we find ourselves going through long periods of time where we don't experience success.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we're facing difficult situations at our job,
Yeah.
or maybe family struggles, or a number of different factors where things just don't seem to be going right, and everything seems to be falling apart, and so we don't feel successful. And so when we go through these long stretches of time where we think, man, I can't do anything right, then all that does is minimize our perception of ourselves, which is going to cause our self-esteem to go way down.
Right.
So sometimes I think we struggle finding the right definition of what success looks like for us.
Right.
And oftentimes when we don't define what success looks like, then we compare success to other people, and that may be unfair to our abilities. So when we think about why oftentimes our self-esteem isn't where it should be, oftentimes it's because we haven't considered what does success look like for me.
Right.
And when we can set realistic goals for ourselves that we can attain, then we can begin to see that we can be successful and we can do things and that can help elevate our self-esteem.
Right. I think you hit the point when you said that such phrases as "I can't ever do anything right." I think that really gets to that very point of we got all of these cognitive issues coming up, distortions and things like that. So the ideal of it is to get to the point to where a person can actually begin to challenge those definite thoughts that they've having. If you can say, I can never do anything right, if we could ever show them that they have done one thing right, then that should do away with that kind of a faulty thinking. Yeah. But if we don't begin to see some good things taking place, then I can see where a person can be kind of lulled into that type of mindset. I've seen that a lot with a lot of people over the years, and hopefully, if we catch it soon enough, we can kind of abate some things and sit down and see where people have really done some good. Yeah. One thing about self-esteem is not static. It's not like you feel good at one point about yourself, and that will last you for a lifetime. It won't even last you sometime for a week or a month. But the ideal of it is that self-esteem has to be nurtured. It has to be maintained. In other words, it's like a muscle flexing. We'll develop an atrophy, a weakening of things if we don't exercise it. And the same way it is about self-esteem. If we don't see constant or consistent successes in life, then out goes the self-esteem. So it's not something that's static. It's something that has to be maintained and nurtured through additional moments of success.
Yeah. Maslow, who was a man who did a lot of study in the field, of self-esteem, and it talked a lot about self-worth and things. He suggested that people need both self-esteem from other people and from ourselves in order to have a true sense of inner self-respect. Right? So when we think about this idea of self-esteem, it requires both an internal and external encouragement to help us receive the self-esteem and the self-worth that maybe can make a difference for us. You know, if we view ourselves as the greatest thing of all time,
Yes.
but other people don't feel that way and they don't reciprocate those feelings, then it's going to lower our self-esteem. And the opposite is true, right? If we feel like we are nothing, but other people see great value in us and try to elevate us, we still will fail to reach the level that we should be reaching because we're not receiving that encouragement from both inside of us and from outside.
Yeah.
So I think Maslow brought a great point that the perception not only of ourselves but of others plays a huge role in our self-esteem.
I did a number of my clients over the years of counseling. Most of them would have issues of self-esteem. They would say low self-esteem, which I find is kind of difficult. I don't know if you're going to have esteem and it's low. It seems to me you're either going to have it or not. But that, as I said before, that self-esteem, number one, you are the deciding factor in this. The individual is the deciding factor. We do need, and I applaud you, that other people highlighting incidences in our lives, successes in our lives, so that we can take those and move forward, realizing that I've done this before, I can do this again, I've felt good about where I have been in the past, and I know I can feel good right now in this present. I just need a different set of circumstances, some evidences to prove that point. As I've said before, before I came aboard and be a part of the team here, I'd been up in counseling for 20-some odd years, and self-esteem seemed to be the number one issue that most of the clients have. So I had to get back with their family members and the other people you mentioned about Maslow, and get with this individual to be able to work so that that particular client can get to that point to where they feel and know that they can succeed because the evidence is before them. Then we began to move forward as far as their treatment plan was concerned. But I do believe that it is an inside job supported by the external, as you just said.
Yeah. The problem that I think oftentimes we run into is we become more concerned by feeling value from outside sources instead of the inside sources. And when we become more concerned with the values and the self-worth that culture or society or others put on us, then we're going to struggle getting to the point where we truly feel as valuable as we are. But I think that's a normal thing in our world, that we become so concerned with looking at our culture and what culture says makes someone valuable, and that becomes our goal in life. We need to do these things so that we can be like culture.
Yes.
What's interesting to me is that something that a mindset that has been around forever. It's prevalent in our world today, but we see it all throughout time. In fact, in John chapter 9, there's an encounter that Jesus has with a man where we see this very situation take place, where we see that culture has dictated what makes someone valuable.
Correct.
And so what I want us to do is I want us to spend a couple minutes looking at this encounter Jesus has with this man, and notice the things that culture says make someone valuable, and understand why that's such a challenge for us to live in a world that has these cultural standards, and that are so hard to meet, and how can we have high self-esteem in that kind of a culture. So let's, if you have your Bibles, open with me to John chapter 9. All right. And let's understand this encounter Jesus has. So just by way of a little background here, Jesus is traveling with his disciples, and they encounter a man who we're told was blind since his birth. So Jesus, after he encounters this man with his disciples, he has a conversation with his disciples, and we'll talk about it here in a minute. But he has a conversation with them.
Yes.
And after he has this conversation, he kneels down next to this man who is born blind, and he spits in the dirt, and he creates this clay, and he rubs it on the man's eyes. And he tells the man to go and wash at the pool of Siloam, and when he does so, he'll receive his sight. So this man, he obeys the words of Jesus. He goes and he washes in the pool of Siloam, and he's seeing for the first time in his entire life.
Yes.
Right? This is one of those moments that a transformative moment in his life.
Yeah.
Right? A pivotal turning point moment where he is able to do something he's never been able to do before. And this is a moment that he should be celebrated, and other people should be celebrating with him. But what we're going to notice is because culture has dictated what's important and what makes someone valuable, this man doesn't receive the encouragement that he should be receiving in the situation.
Right.
So let's notice three different groups of people who really reveal to us the perception and the perspective that culture has when it comes to what makes someone valuable. The first thing we notice here is that oftentimes culture says that someone is valuable based on their physical appearances. Okay. Let's notice verse 1 of John chapter 9. See here again. This is that they've just encountered this man. They pass by him. He's been blind since birth. Verse 2, the disciples ask Jesus, saying, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Right? They see this man and they assume something terrible has happened. This man must be a sinner because look at his physical appearance. Right? He has these physical limitations, so something has happened. So they don't see the man for who he is. They see him based on his physical appearance. But it wasn't just him. Right? If we move forward in verse 8, we see after this man has been healed, people are confused about what's happened. How is it possible? And his neighbors, these people that should know him, know his family, should know his name, all they say, they look at this man and they say, in verse 8, "Is not this he who sat and begged?" They saw him as this man who continually would sit and beg for money or for food just to survive because of his physical limitations. So we see a culture who's looking at this man based on his physical features and his physical limitations and recognizing that he's not as valuable or important, or he's not worth as much as other people because of those physical things.
Gotcha. That's a sad thing because, number one, they assume too much. And it is amazing how someone's assumptions about something or misunderstanding of something can even impact the concept of ourselves, of how we feel about ourselves. And if they feel this way about you, then chances are they're going to interact with you in a different type of way. And so that really will shape you because you have some physical limitations. The limitation may frustrate you, they may get you down, they may depress you, and then that takes away whatever healthy sense of self-concept one may have developed. And so I can see where an individual with the cultural understanding of what is a healthy, beautiful person, I could see that problem, and to many people that would become quite problematic.
Yeah, it's interesting though that same thing happens today. Right? Our culture has established what the ideal man and what the ideal woman is supposed to look like, having these physical features, or having these qualities about them, and the problem with that is every step down we take from that ideal position lowers the value that others and ourselves are going to place on ourselves.
Right,
you know, what happens if maybe we don't have the right physique? What happens if we are balding? What happens if we don't fit a certain social, economic setting, right? What happens if all of these things happen and we don't meet the ideal standard?
Mm-hmm.
All our culture is doing is saying, because you don't look like this physically or meet these standards, you're not as valuable as someone else that has all these other things.
That's right. I'm going to tell you something. It may be a little comical or humorous, but you almost described me. But I can say this right now, we do have these standards. As I said, they got every year they pick out the most handsome man in the world, and they check out the most beautiful lady in the world, and those are the kind of things that people who may not be as, quote, physically attractive could look at that, and they try to measure themselves, by that, and that really can cause some issues here. I just think that what we deem to be beautiful aesthetically is more damaging, I believe, than we would care to admit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oftentimes when it comes to our self-worth and our self-esteem,
Mm-hmm.
we allow culture to dictate our value based on physical appearance.
Mm-hmm.
But let's notice the second thing we can learn from this passage here in John chapter 9.
Mm-hmm.
We see that oftentimes our society places value on people based on their acceptance of different societal ideologies.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
let me explain what I mean by that. All right, as we continue here in John chapter 9, this man has just been healed. He comes back to his hometown, and he should be celebrating, right?
Yeah.
And people should be celebrating with him. But instead, he encounters the Pharisees,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the Pharisees, as we see here in verses 13 through 17, their main question, their main concern about this man was not about his health, not about the fact that he has been healed in any way, but their concern was that he was healed on the Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
And they began questioning this man because of that. They had set these standards and these traditions that they expected everyone else to follow. And someone didn't follow them, then that person what was in the wrong, and they looked down on that individual. You see, in this time, the first century here, they were still living under the old law, right? So under the old law, there was a requirement that they were to observe the Sabbath and to keep it holy, right? That was a requirement. The problem was the Pharisees had put extra guidelines, added things to this, and they were being very hypocritical in what they considered to be keeping the Sabbath. And in fact, there's another encounter where Jesus had healed a man, and the Pharisees were there and questioning about healing on the Sabbath. Jesus said to them, he said, "Which one of you, if your ox fell into a ditch, wouldn't help your ox on the Sabbath?" Right? And all of them acknowledging the fact that they would help their ox.
Okay.
To them, that wasn't working on the Sabbath. But to see Jesus heal a man that was really in need, they said that was work, and they were questioning him and upset with him and trying to devalue him because of the work that was done on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
So here we see the Pharisees creating these societal ideologies that they expected everyone else to live by, and when people didn't live by them, they began to devalue those individuals.
I tell you what, whenever we allow social norms and political things come into the equation of dealing with people, we end up with one big mess. And a lot of people are destroyed, if not physically, but emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually when we do that. So we have to ever be careful. We place demands on people that perhaps they can't reach, or we downgrade them because they haven't done some things we thought they should have done. I think people need to take in consideration that when that is done, people are actually genuinely moved and hurt by that emotionally and psychologically. I don't think that in the realm of religion that we practice that, but that's what really happens. We emotionally damage people sometimes in church sometimes.
Yeah. You know, as we think about these societal ideologies and these standards that are set, the problem that we run into a lot in our culture today is that a lot of those societal ideologies go against the standards that God has set.
Oh yeah.
So if we as Christians are dedicated to our faithfulness to God and standing up for the truth,
Yes.
sometimes that means that we can't agree with or live by the ideologies that our culture has set.
That's true.
So we have a choice as Christians. Are we gonna stand by the truth and allow culture to maybe view us as less valuable or less important or uneducated?
Right.
Or are we going to allow ourselves to assimilate to our culture and look more like our culture and act like our culture, so that the culture can value us as higher than at a higher level?
Yes.
So it's a difficult choice we run into when it comes to these societal ideologies.
Well, I tell you what, it's not an easy transition from that ideal of that whole system of unhealthy thoughts and those expectations, which really cause people to feel like failures at times, rather than people who are on their journey, striving, making those incremental steps, moving forward. My problem would be is that we need to sit down for ourselves and look at some things on our own, see exactly what we've done in the past, and see if we can kind of replicate that, while I'm also, as you said, I'm assimilating with things. I'm growing and developing. I'm sharing my successes, and I'm seeing what success is from others. Give me a more healthy sense of what this ought to be looking like and how I can go about doing that.
Yeah. So again, here in John 9, we see this second thing that oftentimes culture uses to determine the value that is placed on someone.
Okay.
Are they living by and meeting and obeying these ideological or these societal ideologies? But there's a third thing here that I want you to quickly notice, and maybe this is the one that most of us can relate to, maybe more than others.
Yeah.
The third thing we notice is that oftentimes culture says that someone is valuable based on whether or not they are accepted by others. As we continue in John chapter 9, things really take a turn in an interesting way here. Okay, the Pharisees have been questioning this man about how he was healed, who healed him, all of these things, and that they're not believing that Jesus was the one that had healed him. They don't believe any of this, and so they believe maybe it was a trick. Maybe he wasn't really born blind. Right? This is all a trick. So to get to the bottom of the situation, they decide to go to the man's parents.
Okay.
Right? If anyone's going to know information about this man, it's going to be his parents. So we see in verses 18 through 22, where the Pharisees, they go to his parents and they begin talking to them about the situation at hand, saying this man claims that he was born blind and that he was healed. And so they ask his parents, is all of this true? And verse 20, we see that their response said, we know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But by what means he now sees, we do not know. Or who opened his eyes, we do not know. He is of age, ask him, he will speak for himself. But here's what's really interesting.
Yeah.
Notice verse 22, here's the reason why they said that. It said, his parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had agreed already that if anyone confessed that he was Christ, he would be put out of the synagogue.
Okay.
So they chose to be accepted by culture rather than supporting their son. They found their self-worth, their self-value, their self-esteem based on it being accepted, to the point that they sacrificed this relationship with their own son. Sometimes I think when it comes to our self-worth and our self-esteem, we base it solely on other people accepting us and us being a part of something. And that can be a real danger for us.
Well, the ideal of it is, I think it shows also the importance of the home environment, parental participation in a child's healthy sense of self. Here they are. They could have said yes, stood up, yes, he was born, we do it. However, the ideal, I think you brought out clearly, is that they're more so concerned about them having and not being accepted, which not only would cause them much kind of a problem in the Jewish community and religious community. So I think sometimes in the ideal of searching for success, that and acceptance, we cause our own to not find it, which is really what really happened. They could have just stood up and said yes, and not worry about being accepted by society, but embraced by the Son. Yeah. That's a bad choice they made, and we perhaps will not ever know until the end of time how that impacted their relationship, though. Mm-hmm. Yes.
You know, our culture has created an atmosphere where acceptance is so vital to our self-worth. You know, we think about we become so concerned about maybe how many likes we get on a picture on Instagram, right? Or we become concerned about how many friends or how many followers we have on social media accounts.
Yes.
Maybe we worry about how many compliments we get on a new outfit or on a new haircut, and if we don't receive this positive affirmation from people, then we begin to feel like we're not as important as we are, and we lose the self-esteem. But that's the way our culture is designed. Social media has made that to where it's almost a competition of how many friends can you have,
right?
And how many likes can you get, and how many followers can you have, and that really it can be harmful when it comes to our self-esteem.
Big time.
So there are so many factors we can look at that our culture has put out that help us indicate the value that's placed on someone. We've looked at 3 here, and all of those that were prevalent in John chapter 9, they're prevalent in our world today too. The problem is, though, when we become so concerned, when we base our self-esteem on these cultural standards, then we will likely never feel as valuable as we truly are. But when we become so concerned with our culture, what our culture thinks, then we're setting ourselves up for failure when it comes to our self-esteem. So with that in mind, John, why don't you talk through several things that maybe we can do in this culture-driven world to help elevate our self-esteem.
Right. I do believe what you said, though. Unless that self-esteem comes from within more so than outward, we're going to be, old man said, dealing with an emotional house of cards. It was eventually come crumbling down because if it's not based on your experiences, your successes, then we're going to have some issues here. So what can we do to enhance self-esteem? As I said, we need to look within. You need to understand what you bring to the table. In other words, you can look at all the things that you have accomplished. Just kind of sit back and just get a listing of your accomplishments. You may look at some in the past and see where you have been successful, which motivates you to know that you have done it before, you can do it again. However, you want to have a ready right now, what do you want to talk about that? A real life right now, a listing of accomplishment that you have made. That gives you a sense of accomplishment, of achievement, which will make you think that I'm doing pretty good. And then I would say, even on a daily basis, you can, old man said, just count your successes. They don't have to be extremely large. They don't have to be something that you're going to read in the newspaper or hear on the television. You're not going to be anything like that. You might not hear that big buzz over there, as you said, get so many tags on Facebook or whatever. But the idea of it is just small instances of where you've seen you are succeeding and the goals that you've set. You set goals for yourself. Look for that challenge. Sit down and talk with yourself. Said, before I have been successful, and I will again be successful. Smart goals. Get your time limits together and moving forward. Surround yourself with some people who have faith in you. Get people who have seen you accomplished a number of things, who have watched you grow socially, emotionally, intellectually, educationally, whatever. And surround yourself with people who can strengthen you and offer you insights where perhaps you may not be thinking about, and they can bring those things to your memory. That's what I would do. Some of those things to do that. Take on a new task, something that's in keeping with your skill sets, and just one after the other. Success, success, success. As they said, success breeds success. Mm-hmm. And if that be the case, then I am constantly laying another level of my value, of my self-worth. That is my self-esteem. Those are things, some of the things you could do at this time I can think about.
Yeah, it's interesting. All of those things you mentioned involve us taking actions to help ensure our self-esteem is going to go forward.
Yes.
Right? Deciding, thinking about the things that we're good at.
Uh-huh.
Right? Look internally.
Yes.
What can I be successful in? Setting personal goals
right.
to help us do that. Writing down those successes when they happen, so that we can keep them in front of us.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of self-esteem, as we talked about from the very beginning, is something that begins with us.
Yes.
The outside factors play a role, but it starts with us. And so, so when we transition the way we think from focusing more on internal things rather than external things, then it's going to help set us up for success when it comes to having a high self-esteem. You know, in our culture-driven world, it's sometimes difficult to feel valuable. But when we look internally and we think about it from a spiritual perspective, we can recognize how truly valuable we are. I want you to think just for a minute about two passages that help us recognize how valuable we really are, how important we really are, and things we should remember on a daily basis that can help elevate our self-esteem. Number one is I want us to go back to the very beginning of time. Genesis chapter 1 and verse 27. As God is creating mankind, he said, let us make man in our image.
Yes.
Right? We as human beings are created in the image of God. Of all creation, of everything God created, He chose to create you and create me in His own image. That is significant. That God sees value in each of us, and so He wanted us to be created in His image. That's number one. That's important. Here's a second passage. Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 10.
Yes.
In this passage, here's what the Apostle Paul said. He said, we are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works. Here's what that means. I want to give an illustration that helps us understand what that means. When it comes to tennis shoes, I only wear Nike tennis shoes. I've always worn them. I've had good luck with them. They've lasted for me. So I wear Nike tennis shoes. I know that when I buy a pair of Nikes, they're going to last for me because they've lasted in the past. And so I trust them. You see, the reason I know I can trust them is because when a Nike shoe is created, it has to meet certain specifications, certain quality standards in order for it to reach the consumer. So if a shoe doesn't meet that quality, it's never going to make it to the consumer. And the reason they do that is because it has Nike's name and Nike logo on that shoe. So if they put out a bad product, it's going to lower their value. Right? When we think about we are God's workmanship, what that means is God has put His logo, His stamp of approval on each of us. God considered each of us to be valuable enough that He puts His logo and His stamp of approval on us. It doesn't matter what culture says. It doesn't matter what we look like. It doesn't matter what our past is like. It doesn't matter what choices we make, what decisions we make. God saw each of us as valuable enough that He put His logo on us.
There you go.
So when we focus solely on outside perceptions of what brings value to people, we lose what's most important. And that's the fact that God created us in His image, and we have His stamp of approval, which should add great value to us.
So that would be it. So you telling me and all of us that if God made you, He ain't make no bad stuff.
That's right.
So we ought to be feeling pretty good about who we are with just being in the image of God. That That is the launching pad for them to be able to develop that individual self-concept, leading to that self-esteem, and you'll see them having successful things happening to them as the years come and go.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've worked through this idea of self-esteem, and there are a number of things that I think it's important that we take away from here.
Mm-hmm.
First off, self-esteem begins with us.
Yes.
It's an internal thing that we must be working on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We must be focusing on what we can do to find success in our life. Let's define what is success in our lives right now, and let's set goals that we can meet that and become successful. It begins with us, but there are outside factors. But when we allow outside factors to dictate our value, then we're setting ourselves up for failure, right?
Surely.
Our culture says that people are successful based on their appearance, or they're successful based on meeting these societal ideologies, or they're successful because they're accepted, right? But when those become our standards for value in our own lives, we're never going to be as valuable. We're never going to feel as valuable as we really are.
Right.
So we must remember that we're created in the image of God.
In the image of God.
And that He has put His stamp of approval on us. In the eyes of God, we have incredible value. And so when we're struggling with our self-esteem in our lives, we need to take a step back, look internally, and focus on God and God's standards rather than man's standards and culture's standards.
Totally.
We hope that this discussion has been beneficial to you, and maybe in your life, if you're struggling with self-esteem and you're struggling with your value, we want you to know how valuable you really are.
Right.
We want you to know how valuable God sees you, and we hope that if you are struggling in those ways and you need help, and you need to talk to someone, that you'll reach out to us or find someone you can talk to to help recognize how valuable you really are.
Amen.
We thank you so much for joining us and tuning in. We hope that you'll join us every Thursday at noon here on the Abundant Life Podcast.